Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a conversation with a top official at one of America's leading veteran service organizations. With news swirling around vets issues in the early days of the Trump administration, we sit down with an expert to talk through top issues and concerns for veterans groups. Coming to you from the nation's capital, it's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly.
Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Leo Shane, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Military Times, coming to you today from our studio in Washington, D.C. Today with us, we have John Retzer, Deputy National Legislative Director for Health at Disabled American Veterans. John, I asked you to come here to talk about the independent budget. This is something that Disabled American Veterans, Paralyzed Veterans of America, and Veterans of Foreign Wars put together to sort of give a sense of what the needs are at VA. And the report this year that you guys have put together says that there are still significant needs. You're talking about a 15 to 20% increase in VA spending or funding that's needed. VA has seen quite a bit of increase over recent years, especially as other government agencies have pulled back. Why do you think that VA needs that much money? What are you guys seeing that maybe the public isn't?
Well, first, thank you for having DAV and for us to have an opportunity to speak with you on this. This is a very important issue that we have tackled for nearly 40 years with the three organizations. And what we try to do with this budget recommendation is to speak on behalf of what we see from our members, our users in the veterans healthcare and the benefits side. So I think one of the things that we see with regards to the needs of this report is that to provide the services and in benefits and in healthcare, we need to be able to realistically look at these numbers of all the needs in the different service department lines. And so when you look at, for example, the healthcare, you're looking at a population of right now, veteran population, about 18 million veterans, but over 9.1 million veterans are enrolled in the VA healthcare system. So it's the largest integrated healthcare system in our nation. And to be able to provide services where the veterans are, and we have to understand that they're in every state. They are in metropolitans, they're in remote rural areas, and we have veterans that have very specialized care. With modern medicine, what medicine has been able to do to save lives has also left our veterans with very serious injuries and illnesses to try to live their life with some type of quality and dignity and able to live a fulfilling life. So what we've done here is looking at a very comprehensive way to identify very tailored individual care needs for veterans at whatever they're dealing with and wherever they're at. So I think when you look at it from a standpoint of the priorities that you see, for example, suicide prevention, mental health issues, that's a huge issue because we know that in the most recent report that the 2022 year shows that we had an increase in veteran suicide, unfortunately. And when we look at the time period in which they were recording the data with regards to veteran suicide, we have seen from 2000 to now that has been a steady increase going throughout that period from 2000 to where we are now. So we have to be able to address these issues. But when you address the issue of mental health and suicide prevention, it's complicated. There's so many components built into it. So you have the infrastructure. And within the physical infrastructure, you have major, minor construction issues, and then you have technology issues. Right now, the Congress and VA are tackling the electronic health record system to being able to not only have ability to exchange documents from one VISN within the VA, and that's the VA's regional locations, to be able to speak to the department levels at the VA medical centers, and then to the CBOCs, but it's also to partner with our community care. But then there's another component of that too that we need to do with DoD. We need to be able to work with the Department of Defense to be able to have that interoperability within DoD and VA to speak to each other about what happens with service members, the records following them through the benefit side, and then also the benefit side going to the healthcare side. And so that there's that continuity of understanding where the veteran started their injuries and illnesses, what's happening with them to coordinate their care, and then obviously, we have our partnership with community care. That takes a very large infrastructure. So when we look at it, we've got the major, minor physical buildings, we've got IT needs, but then to make all that work, staffing. There is an ongoing issue of staffing, and people may ask, well, the veteran population is showing a reduction as we go through the years. But the fact is, while we see these reductions in the population of veterans, it's so important to understand the request for the need for direct VA healthcare is increasing. So another example of the infrastructure and even the ability to work within the community is, for example, our long-term care. Our 9.1 million veterans that are enrolled, but you'll see that there is an increase in veteran population that are over age 65. So as that is increasing, we call it the silver tsunami. Those veterans that are 65 and older are so large in population that the infrastructure is not ready for that. So we have to have very robust abilities to not only provide VA direct long-term care, but also within the community by partnering with state veterans homes, for example, and community living centers out there.
I think it's really interesting because a lot of folks see the end of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They think, okay, so now those costs are finished. Now we're done with that. Whereas VA, that's really the starting point now. You're looking at going into the future, as you said, the silver tsunami, as some of these groups age. It's really the costs coming to bear from the wounds and from the injuries there. So I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that more money is needed, but is it at a sustainable pace at this point? Is what you guys are looking at in this and with your recommendations talking about another big increase when there's big increases, have been big increases? Is that just a realistic plan forward?
And I think, when we look at our report, what we're doing is we're looking at the history of VA, the needs of our veteran population, and as we look at it, we just had, the Honoring Our Pact Act. Mm-hmm. That is huge. When you look at that massive piece of legislation, it had a lot of components in there, which actually brings in new users. So Leo, your comment with regards to it starts at VA, it actually starts before that too. What you'll see in our independent report is that we actually have references talking about the Transition Assistance Program. For our military personnel, our service members out there that are dealing with that transition component, it starts with that benefit side, but there's also a healthcare component. So you'll even see where we talk about, increasing the FTE. So for our social workers, we want to ensure that there's a plus up of 3,000 employees brought into a full-time level within the VA. And people may ask, why is that? Well, the reason why we recommended that is a lot of people did not understand our social workers within the VA system are actually wearing two hats. They have a responsibility to not only the Department of Veterans Affairs and the veteran community, but they also have a responsibility to the Department of Defense, helping our service members navigate, for example, deployment issues, counseling for the family and the service member on that. So when they have those two types of very demanding responsibilities, we want to ensure that we start it right at where it begins. And that's with DoD. That's with the Department of Defense, their service, and their injuries and illnesses that actually occur directly from or aggravated by their service. So the PACT Act, like we were talking about, that was all about presumptive issues, being exposed to toxic exposures, and unfortunately leading to very serious illnesses for them, which we have to address those matters with Department of Defense.
So let's talk about the PACT Act, because that passed just a few years ago now. That was a massive expansion of benefits for toxic exposure injuries, really a game-changing piece of legislation. Well, one that has brought, I believe, somewhere around 200,000 new patients into the VA system in the last few years. I know you guys in the independent budget are projecting at least 50,000 more next year. This is going to sound insensitive here, but is that a bad thing? Is that increased usage of bringing those people in? That's increased cost, that's increased stuff, but like that is the goal here, is to bring those folks in and to increase participation, correct?
Yes, I think one of the most important things to understand is these are benefits that our service members earn, and they continue to be able to utilize those benefits that they've earned through their veterans experience, and also to include their caregivers, their family members in that process. When we look at, the benefits that they have earned and what happens with that transition, it's so important that we continue to provide those resources. When you look at it, it saves monies for the taxpayers when you maintain a robust system. There has been such a long and hard investments that have been made within the Department of Veterans Affairs to keep the promise to our veterans for their service, to honor their service, and to say, we'll take care of you. And I think that is where we continue to work with Congress and the administrations to make sure that they don't forget our promise. It's so important, because when you look at what medicine does, it saves lives. But unfortunately, they're living with very catastrophic issues that we got to make sure that we are able to bring a quality of life for them and their families.
You said you'd make sure they don't forget that promise. I mean, that shouldn't be that hard of a sell, but I know that in a time of constrained budgets and a time of cost cutting, which we're in now, that can be somewhat of a difficult pitch. When you've taken the independent budget to Congress in the past, I know they haven't matched it dollar for dollar, but is this at least a receptive message to them, something where they can understand where you're coming from and understand the needs and at least start a conversation about what those are?
Yes, just a couple of weeks ago when we launched the independent budget, we were very fortunate to have the opportunity to be on the Hill to present the report, and it was good to see that we had very bipartisan approach to come and sit down with us and even ask very thoughtful questions with regards to why we're asking for all of this. And we were able to highlight, like I did at the beginning of our interview here, is talk about mental health, suicide prevention, long-term care, the infrastructure, even talking about the tough discussions we've had with where do we go and where are we with electronic, modernization of the health record system, being that there's been a lot of taxpayers' money with regards to that. So we want to make sure that we continue to be responsible with taxpayers' money, but we also want to keep that promise to our service-disabled veterans.
Okay, well, I want to get into some more specifics here, but we're going to take a quick break first, then we'll come back and talk more about the needs facing VA. Welcome back to our conversation with John Retzer. John, talk to me about, you mentioned the long-term care issue and the issues that is facing the veterans population here. What does that mean in terms of spending and in terms of programs? What are the things that you guys think is needed and will be needed in the coming years?
So what we see is, comprehensive markups that are going to be providing, budget needs for staffing, infrastructure, and really that partnership of these alternative programs that I was speaking about earlier. When we look at our veteran population right now, we have a couple challenges, and the challenges are to address the direct VA care process with long-term, and then how does that look for our veterans that are in metropolitan versus those in remote and rural areas, and then at the same time addressing the very specific needs of our women veterans. It's so important that they have domiciliaries that are very safe, meeting their needs and such. But it's getting that right formula with our partners out there. With the state veterans homes, for example, is one of our best partnerships that we have in the various states. But we have to ensure that we support their budget needs to provide more services for our service-disabled veterans that are needing that long-term care. So, and as we look at the concerns surrounding like state veterans homes, because of our catastrophic issues, we have more veterans getting a 50-60% rating, which is more severe, indicating that because in the VA healthcare system, when it comes to long-term care, 70% is identified as the beginning eligibility into long-term care. But what we've identified in the clinical side is that these 50-60% service-connected disabled issues are really catastrophic, and they're going to need most likely long-term care. And it's not just about an aging process either. It's about a young generation, unfortunately, that have sustained these catastrophic issues.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that because a lot of people think long-term care and they think, oh, you're talking about nursing homes for 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, you're talking about something. But this, when we're talking about the veterans population, we're talking about a population that has had some catastrophic injuries. Again, not all of them, but the folks who need this kind of care desperately need this support.
Yeah, and I think, like I've been speaking to the modern medicine saving lives, but it's leaving us with catastrophic issues. When you look at Paralyzed Veterans of America, one of our partners with the independent budget, they are highly focused on, spinal cord injuries. And these spinal cord injuries in many cases have paralysis issues for them, loss of use of extremities. So they rely heavily, for their membership, within the VA direct care system. But what we see with our, ongoing combat situations, for example, traumatic brain injury, blast overpressure, when you have these cognitive issues that also create the neurologic problems, those young individual service members, when they become veterans, will need some type of institutional care sooner than they wish. So we need to be able to facilitate that population also. So we can't just look at it in a narrow scope that this is an aging need. No, this is a all veterans needs issue when they have catastrophic issues.
So you mentioned traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress, you mentioned suicide prevention before. These are all issues that have come under some criticism in recent years because of the lack of success but in VA in solving the problem, you put it in a blunt term. I mean, this has been a stubborn issue, stopping the number of suicides. That 17 a day has remained stubbornly around that area. There have been some folks who have said this is the time to pull back, this is the time to fund less or to fund in a completely different way. The independent budget calls for more investment in this and looking into this. Why is that the right path as opposed to maybe stepping back and reassessing everything?
It's a very good question, because when we look at the landscape of where we're at with our service-disabled veterans, on average, they have 5 comorbidities, and many times it's not just a physical issue, there's a psychological component built in. And when you look at the socioeconomics, and that's why we have a transition assistance program within the Department of Defense to make sure that seamless transition occurs, that all issues are addressed, from benefits to addressing the service-connected benefits, addressing employment issues, and then healthcare concerns, for example. When they then transfer over to the Department of Veterans Affairs as a veteran, those wraparound services exist within the VA. So what's really important with regards to this is that when we look at these topics like mental health, suicide prevention, you don't pull back. You can't stop. We need more to be done, because what we're learning is through our research. And that's another component that we talk about in this, is the need for more research, the staffing, the infrastructure, and continue to support that, because research actually serves not just the veteran population, it serves the nation. Much of what VA has done for research has helped not just our veterans, but the nation itself. So, and there's many things that they have done. However, with the research, it allows us to understand what more can be done with regards to suicide prevention and mental health issues surrounding our veterans, even if it's a depression, anxiety issue, or is it a combat with a TBI and PTSD situation. We need to have that in place so that we can better serve the healthcare, the individualized care, and it's got to be very tailored for that individual. So the reason why we're asking and encourage Congress and the VA to continue to move in the forward direction is it's saving lives. Right now, with the National Report of Suicide Prevention coming out for the 2024 report, it was reflected that over 6,400 veterans' lives were lost in 2022. That was an increase from the previous year. We can't have that increase. We need to do more research. We need to do more funding. So one of the things that we're really talking more and more with Congress and VA is about lethal means safety counseling, lethal means storage. Firearms. So we're trying to build that knowledge and have really, frankly, discussions like you and I are having about mental health and suicide. Having a discussion and being open about, we still need to fix it. There's more work to be done. And that's what the independent budget really does highlight. It's not just one department. It's not just one program we're talking about. We're talking about the largest integrated healthcare system in our government that serves a very large population who provide a service by volunteering to do what they do. So it, again, like I said, it's a promise that we got to keep, and this is how we do it right. We have to look at this packet, this report, as a very comprehensive report to address the holistic concept of taking care of that veteran. There are healthcare components in this, benefits, wraparound services, infrastructure, IT. That's what we talk about here. But what it's really targeting is being responsible for keeping that promise of what we've been saying that we would do, that we will take care of you when you have taken care of us.
Okay, time for another break. When we come back, our financial expert has tips on how to plan for your future.
Need some extra cash for a big improvement project? On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is back with some basics on understanding home equity loans.
Wondering if a home equity loan is your next best money move? Tapping into the equity you've built can be smart. It just depends on your situation and your reasons for doing it. Home equity loans and HELOCs offer lower fixed interest rates compared to other loans, making them ideal for consolidating debt, covering major expenses, or funding home improvements, which can be a bonus to your bottom line since your renovation may increase the value of your home. A home equity line of credit or HELOC is great for ongoing projects since you can use the funds as needed over time. It can also serve as a backup plan for emergencies, offering quick access to funds, while a home equity loan gives you a lump sum for one-time expenses. Always use the equity in your home wisely and responsibly since your home is on the line if you can't repay. So what shouldn't you use your home equity for? Things like big vacations or buying cars. Keep your reasons for borrowing against your home to things that'll help improve your financial situation, like debt consolidation or home improvements. Talk to a trusted financial advisor before you apply. Your home's equity may well be your next best money move.
To get more coverage of military and defense topics, hold up on pulling that grenade pin and go check out militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most informed mechanic in the motor pool, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you collect open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And if you get your news by endlessly scrolling with your thumb, or on TikTok, so go find us there as well. When we come back, the conclusion of our conversation on pressing veterans issues. Stay tuned.
And welcome back, John. Let me leave on this. Where do we go from here? Talk about where you take this to Capitol Hill, what the response is, and how this helps craft the budget as we go ahead to fiscal 2026 at a time when all the budgets are uncertain right now.
I think where we go with this is to continue to share this with Congress and to show the urgency in maintaining our steadfast direction of supporting our veteran population, our service. Disabled veterans really need to have this continuity of care, this confidence in the VA system that they've shown they trust, and we need to continue to move forward. And we really need to ensure that Congress understands their investments that they've done throughout the years. They are the right investments. They're going in the right direction. It's going to take us time, but they can't stop. They cannot waver on this. This is a promise, and we've heard in a very bipartisan manner that this is a promise that they want to keep. So we're going to hold them to that. But what we're doing is we're providing this roadmap for them. From a perspective of 3 veteran service organizations that do this every day. We provide advocacy and we provide guidance for our service disabled veterans to how to get the best care and to have the confidence in the VA healthcare system and the partnerships that they have, along with having confidence that Congress does have our back. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that we want to ensure that everyone can go to DAV.org if they want to see the copy of the independent budget. And along with going to DAV.org, you'll also see our critical policy goals, kind of outlining what are our priorities from our membership. So we also encourage Congress to do the same thing, because those critical policy goals and what's in this is actually coming from our members.
I do hope that viewers go and read this, because it's a very interesting document. It does lay out very well where all the needs are and what you guys are seeing. We've been doing this long enough that we get into these cycles where we hear lawmakers talk about needing to crack down on some of that VA funding. VA funding goes up every year. Oh, we've got to start to rein it in. It doesn't ever seem to get to that point. We do seem to see every year another generous increase in the VA budget. I wonder if you think that's just this message of this is what the importance is. No one wants to be seen as the person who abandons veterans. And when you guys lay these out, it does seem that you're justifying the need for these continued increases, even when other agencies are seeing cuts.
Yes, and I think this budget also goes in line with, if you look at the history of the VA and their budget issues, we just recently had the shortfall.
Yeah.
And that is what we're trying to avoid. We need to make sure that we have mandatory funding for all of VA benefits and the health administration, along with the National Cemetery. So we need to make sure that they're doing everything correctly so that we avoid these shortfalls. Veterans benefits should not have shortfalls, neither should healthcare, or even when we put them to rest. So this is a good reminder for them of looking at it in a very holistic manner to make sure that they're not missing things that will take care of the veterans from beginning to end.
All right, listen, that's all the time we've got for today. John, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having DAV.
And thank all of you for listening. You can read more about the challenges facing VA at militarytimes.com and defensenews.com. We'll see you next week.